Grove Middle School. It is almost May, believe it or not. Mr. Bauman here. Hope you're all doing okay. Since they made the big announcement that we are not going back to school, at least physically, I guess we're stuck talking this way. This is a very weird week, in case you hadn't noticed. Many of you will see this Tuesday, at least for hours 1 through 4. Hours 5 and 6 will see this on Wednesday. This week, hours 1 through 4 will have my class on Tuesday and Thursday. Hour 5 and 6 will only have it Wednesday. You guys get Monday and Friday off this week, and then you get next Monday, May 4th off also. Teachers will be planning new lessons and getting ready for the rest of the school year. So, here we are. Today we're going to talk about communism, and I couldn't make your assignment much easier. Just make sure you watch this video all the way to the end, because the question you have to answer, there's only one, you've got to answer in the comments, or the discussion, rather, is going to be pretty simple. We're talking about why we were so concerned about communism. But first, let's remind you what communism is. If you remember way back to World War I, we talked about communism. First of all, it came from this old dude, Karl Marx. He was a philosopher who wrote a book called, or a pamphlet kind of, called the Communist Manifesto. And in that manifesto, the basics were that Marx said there was a struggle between the rich and the poor. The bourgeoisie, or the rich, and the proletariats, in his words, were the poor. And they're basically the people that have a lot of stuff and don't have a lot of stuff. And it eventually, he said, is going to result in revolution. The working class would rise up and overthrow the owners of the land, the business, and politics. Now, back in the 1800s, life was a little bit different. Still, there was rich and poor like there is today, but it was a little different because the very rich owned all the land and the poor had to work for them, or the very rich owned the businesses and the poor worked for them. Now, where the word comes from is kind of from community. A commune is defined as a group of people living together in a shared community. Communism is a system in which the goods are owned in common and are available to all as needed. So basically, communism means you all work together to share stuff. So everyone does work, they put all their resources together, and then they share those resources so everyone is, well, at least kind of equal. Basically, the steps in the Communist Manifesto is to get rid of private ownership of land. Make all people workers. So instead of just the poor people have to do work, everybody does work. It would mean the country or the state would run the banks, they would run communication and transportation, they'd run the factories and the farms. And everyone would have a free education for children so that everyone would be equal. Because back in the 1800s, for the most part, only rich people went to school for an extended period of time. After about a couple of years, in a lot of cases, you didn't go to school at all if you were very poor. But even if you did start going to school, where schools were required of everyone, most kids only got a basic education to learn how to read and write, and that was about it. Maybe do basic math like addition, subtraction, multiplication, possibly division. But that would be the end of your education, unless you were rich, and then you sent your kids to a higher education. Back then would have been like middle school, probably, and then high school and beyond. What the heck does this have to do with us? That's the question you got to be asking. Well, if you remember, that dude on the left in the picture here is Vladimir Lenin. He leads a revolution in 1917 in Russia, and when he leads that revolution, he is able to defeat the Bolsheviks led by Tsar Nicholas II, and he decides to have them all killed. So the Tsar and all his all the other leaders in the country are killed, and he creates a communist system in Russia. Vladimir Lenin led that revolution. But when Lenin dies, Joseph Stalin, the guy on the right, takes over. And Stalin runs the country for almost 30 years before his death. Under Stalin, the Soviet Union, which used to be called Russia and now is again, was transformed from a peasant society into an industrial and military superpower. So it used to be a society where most of the people were called peasants and they worked the farms for the very rich. Now he was going to try to transform that into an industrial power. The problem was he ruled by terror, and millions of his own citizens died during his brutal reign. We talk about Hitler killing over 6 million people, including Jews and many other groups, and that's horrible. Well, under Joseph Stalin, the belief is he killed somewhere between 12 and 40 million people. Most of them, we have no idea how or why they were killed or if they were killed. We just know they were sent off to Siberia to go live in the Gulag, the Russian prison. And there's no way, we know that there's a certain number of people that were sent there. There's just no possibility all of them could have lived there because there just wasn't enough room in the gulags that were found. Unlike Hitler, we found lists of the number of people who were sent to concentration camps and later killed. They kept records in Nazi Germany. Stalin did not. So it's a little different. Communism is no longer Karl Marx's ideas. It's no longer this thing where it's rich versus the poor, everyone runs everything in shares. Now it's this guy, Joseph Stalin, runs everything. He decides everything. And unfortunately, a lot of the decisions he made were very, very poor and only were there to help him. So we've talked about this before. Communism, the idea is a nice, happy idea that everyone will share everything. The problem is that human beings always screw that up. And Joseph Stalin was no better than anybody else. He was greedy. He wanted more than average. And communism was no longer what it really was supposed to be. It was never supposed to be a government system. It was always supposed to be an economic system where people's money was controlled by this, not a government controlled by one guy who told everyone what to do and killed them if they questioned him. Well, what does this have to do with us? Stalin and the Soviet Union end up on the side of the Allies trying to stop Adolf Hitler. This was not something that Franklin D. Roosevelt or FDR was excited about. Oh, great. I'm going to fight with this idiot. Really, the thought on his part was, I guess we don't have much choice. We need the help. The British and the French had no chance, really, against the Germans. So when the war ends, as you can see, the red and the blue, Germany got split up. West Germany, here, if you look at the map, West Germany's over here, East Germany over here. The whole red section is going to be what Stalin and the Soviet Union take over. And that's red because it becomes communist. The blue sections look that way because those were still democratic countries who allowed elections of their leaders. The big key here is that after the war, Stalin sets up his communism in all those countries, and they start threatening other areas. They threaten countries. Well, first they slowly take over. They took over Poland and East Germany and Czechoslovakia during the war, but then after the war, they take over Romania and Bulgaria and Hungary, and they threaten countries like Greece and Turkey. They're even going to threaten Austria, and places like that, and Finland. And it's only because the Western European nations and the U.S. don't want Stalin to spread communism that they get together. They're going to make decisions as a group. They're going to create a group called NATO that we'll talk about in the next lesson. NATO is the North Atlantic Treaty Organization that's going to be purposely set up to stop this spread of communism. Now, communism is an issue for us in history, right? How do we stop the spread of communism? Basically, we have this thing called the Cold War, where both sides try to make friends with everyone. The Soviets try to make friends, we try to make friends, and we try to get them to take our side, to take our beliefs in democracy so that people remain democratic and don't have communism spread. We have this huge fear that communism, if it spread further and further, could spread all the way through Europe, obviously through into France, and then into Britain and Ireland, and then across the water into the United States. We'll continue that fear throughout, and that's how we end up in wars in Korea and in Vietnam in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, is because we are afraid of this communism idea spreading. All right, now here's your question. When you get into this, you'll be here, you'll watch the video. This is our communism introduction, I guess, as what we'll call this. And you watch the video, it's there, it'll be linked, and then you answer this question in the discussion box. It'll be very, very easy 5 points. All you gotta do is watch it, answer the question, and it's a minimum of 2 sentences. If you don't have 2 sentences, I'm just gonna mark it a 0 and you can do it over. Okay? If you don't actually tell me what I talked about in this video, I'm gonna mark it a 0. If you just make up nonsense, make sure you write a couple sentences. All right? Have a great day, everybody. Stay out of trouble. Hope everybody's doing okay. And hopefully, if you're behind here, hopefully you're getting yourself caught up. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.